The crystal chandeliers of the Grayson Museum Gala cast a light that felt more like an interrogation lamp than a celebration. Sarah, 8 months pregnant and invisible, clutched a glass of water, her simple dress a stark contrast to the couture gowns surrounding her. Her husband, Richard, hadn't looked at her in an hour. His laughter, however, was loud as it echoed from the center of the room, where he stood with Morgana Van Kempt. The air was thick with old money and new cruelty. They were all waiting for the final humiliation, the public severing. But what they didn't know was that a secret, centuries old, was currently crossing the Atlantic, destined for this very ballroom. The Grayson Museum of Art was not a public space tonight. It was the personal ballroom of the Grayson family, and the annual Foundation Gala was the absolute pinnacle of New York's philanthropic and social calendar. It was a room designed to intimidate. 30-foot marble columns, original Rubens tapestries lining the walls, and a sea of diamonds and designer labels so dense it created its own ambient, expensive hum. Sarah felt like a mouse in a lion's den. 8 months pregnant, her body felt cumbersome and alien. The baby, a boy she had already named Marcus in her mind, was pressing against her ribs, making each breath a shallow exercise. Her dress was the source of the first whispers. It was a deep navy maternity gown, elegant but devastatingly simple. It was the best she could afford on the allowance her husband, Richard Grayson, permitted her. In this room, it was a social crime. It screamed lack of status. "Richard, darling, the water is fine," she murmured, trying to catch his eye as he strode past her, his custom-tailored Tom Ford suit fitting him like a second skin. "Don't interrupt me, Sarah. I'm networking," he hissed, not even breaking his stride. He moved toward the epicenter of the noise and light, Morgana Van Kempt. Morgana was everything Sarah was not. She was the heiress to the Van Kempt global shipping empire. Her dress was a sliver of metallic silver that seemed poured onto her body, her laughter sharp and practiced. She saw Sarah watching and, with a predatory grace, looped her arm through Richard's. He didn't pull away. He leaned in. Sarah retreated to the relative anonymity of a shadowy alcove, right behind a large, imposing statue of a Greek god. She watched her husband, the man she'd met in a college library and fallen in love with, publicly flaunt his infidelity. The love story felt like a lifetime ago. She had been a brilliant scholarship student in art history. He, the charming, rebellious heir to a real estate fortune. Their marriage, she now realized, had been his last act of rebellion. The act was over. "Can you believe he brought it?" a voice whispered, sharp as broken glass. Sarah froze. 2 women, their faces tight with cosmetic procedures, had stopped near her alcove. "Morgana must be livid," the first one, a woman named Bitsy, said. "She told Richard to leave the charity case at home." "Beatrice is furious," the second, a woman named Lynn, added, sipping her champagne. "She said the girl is hopelessly common. Look at that dress. It's polyester at the Grayson Gala. And pregnant? It's just tacky. It's like she's trying to trap him with a pity baby." "Well, it's not working. My broker told me Richard just bought a penthouse at 15 Central Park West. And the deed isn't in Sarah's name. It's in Morgana's." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. A penthouse. He had told her they couldn't afford a bigger apartment, not with the market so tight. He had told her she needed to cut back on groceries. She turned to leave the alcove, wanting to run, but bumped squarely into a waiter, sloshing her water onto the pristine marble floor. Silence. Every head within a 20-foot radius turned. Morgana Van Kempt's voice cut through the air. "Oh dear. Be careful, Sarah. We wouldn't want you to slip. That is your only dress, isn't it?" A wave of cruel, suppressed laughter rippled through the crowd. Richard's face hardened, not in defense of her, but in sheer, unadulterated annoyance. He didn't look at Sarah. He just smiled at Morgana, a shared joke. Sarah stood there, pregnant, alone, and burning with a shame so profound it tasted like acid. She had never felt so small, so utterly worthless. She didn't know it, but across the world, in a vault in Zurich, a man was closing a briefcase. The final document had been signed. Sarah managed to escape to the ladies' powder room, a cavernous space of pink marble and gold-plated swan faucets. She locked herself in a stall, pressing her forehead against the cool steel, trying to control the ragged, panicked breaths that were threatening to become sobs. He's giving his mistress a penthouse. They think I'm a tacky gold digger. He's letting them say this. The baby kicked, a sharp, sudden jab. It was a reminder. This isn't just about me. She thought of her grandfather, Henrik Ethelredge. He had raised her in a quiet, sprawling, but decidedly simple farmhouse in the Swiss countryside after her parents died. He was a historian, a man of books and quiet routines. He'd taught her to be frugal, to be humble, to never mistake wealth for worth. The world is full of noisy, empty people, Schatzli, he used to tell her, his voice thick with a faint, unplaceable accent. They build their houses on foundations of ego. One strong wind, and it all collapses. You are built of stone. Remember that. Your time will come. Don't show them your strength until you must. She had thought it was just the rambling of an old, sweet man. She'd met Richard during her year abroad studying at Columbia. She had been so enchanted by his world, she'd forgotten her grandfather's warnings. When Henrik died a month ago, she had been heartbroken, unable to even fly back for the funeral, because Richard had said it was an unnecessary expense so late in her pregnancy. She splashed cold water on her face, recomposing herself. Stone. Be stone. She emerged from the stall to find she was no longer alone. Beatrice Grayson, Richard's mother, stood by the sinks, reapplying her dark red lipstick. She was a tall, skeletal woman in a severe black gown, dripping with emeralds that had been in her family for generations. She met Sarah's eyes in the mirror. So, Beatrice began, her voice a low, cold drawl. You decided to show your face after all. Beatrice, I needed a moment, Sarah said, smoothing her dress. Beatrice snapped her lipstick shut. A moment? You've had your moment, dear. It's lasted 2 years, and it's over. She turned, her emerald earrings catching the light. I don't know what little tramp's trick you pulled to get my son to marry you. That thing, she gestured to Sarah's stomach, was a clever, desperate little move. But it won't work. It's his child, Sarah whispered, her hands instinctively moving to protect her baby. It's an inconvenience, Beatrice corrected, stepping closer. The smell of her expensive, cloying perfume, fracas, was overwhelming. Richard is a Grayson. He requires an equal. Morgana van Kempt is an equal. You are a footnote, a scholarship student from God knows where in Switzerland. I loved him, Sarah said, the words feeling thin in the air. Love, Beatrice scoffed, a sound like dry leaves scraping pavement. Love is for the poor. We deal in legacies. You have no legacy. You have no name. You have no money. You are a biological dead end attached to my son's bank account, and I am cutting you off. You can't, Sarah said, though her voice wavered. Oh, I can. I've already instructed my lawyers to draw up the annulment papers. We will claim mental instability. Your grief over your grandfather, perhaps. You'll be given a small stipend, enough to disappear. The child, of course, will remain a Grayson. We will raise it. You will have no part. The sheer, calculated cruelty of it stole Sarah's breath. They weren't just divorcing her. They were erasing her. They were going to take her son. No, Sarah said, and this time her voice was different. The fear was replaced by a cold, sharp anger that resonated with Henrik's memory. No, you won't. Beatrice raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. Won't I? You have nothing, child. Now fix your face. The main course is being served. Richard will be making an announcement with Morgana. The least you can do is try not to look like a spurned housemaid when he does it. Beatrice swept out of the room, leaving Sarah alone in the deafening, gilded silence, the echo of her words hanging in the air. You have nothing. You have no name. Returning to the ballroom was the hardest walk of Sarah's life. Each step felt like walking on broken glass. The whispers followed her, a physical wave of malice. She saw Richard and Morgana seated at the head table, table 1, next to Beatrice. They were laughing, sharing a toast. A waiter, with a pitying look, directed Sarah to her seat. Table 19, in the farthest back corner, next to the swinging doors of the kitchen. She was seated with junior board members and their visibly bored spouses. They offered her tight, insincere smiles before pointedly turning away to continue their own conversations. The humiliation was complete. She was an outcast at her own husband's table. The meal was an agonizing blur of delicate food she couldn't eat. The baby was turning, restless, as if sensing her distress. She rubbed her stomach, trying to project a calm she didn't feel. Then, the clinking of a glass. Richard was on his feet, beaming at the crowd. "Friends, family," he began, his voice smooth and confident. "Thank you all for coming to support the Grayson Foundation. This has been a banner year for us. We've merged assets, secured new lines of credit, and are positioning ourselves for a bold new future." He turned and held out a hand, and much of that future is thanks to a new, dynamic partnership, with a woman who is not just a brilliant businesswoman, but a dear, dear friend. Morgana Van Kempt. Morgana rose, taking his hand. The crowd applauded, a knowing, excited sound. This was it. The announcement. Morgana raised her glass. To the Grayson Foundation, and to new beginnings. Her eyes found Sarah's across the vast expanse of the room. It was a look of pure, unadulterated triumph. And in that spirit of new beginnings, Richard continued, I have one more announcement. It's a difficult one, but one that is necessary for the health of the family and the company. He was going to do it. Here, in front of 300 people. Sarah felt her pulse roaring in her ears. She wanted to stand, to scream, to run. But her grandfather's voice was in her head. Be stone. Don't show them your strength until you must. But as Richard opened his mouth, a different sound cut through the room. Thud, thud, thud. The grand oak doors to the ballroom, the ones used for staff, swung open. It was not a waiter. 3 men entered. They were not in tuxedos. They were in dark, severely tailored European suits that spoke of a different kind of power. They looked less like guests and more like a high-level diplomatic security detail. The man in the center was older, perhaps in his late 60s, with a sharp silver beard and piercing blue eyes. He carried a heavy, reinforced aluminum briefcase. He radiated an aura of absolute, unshakable authority. The ballroom fell silent. This was not on the program. Beatrice Grayson, from the head table, squinted. Her face, which had been a mask of smug satisfaction, suddenly crumpled. The blood drained from it. "Kaelin?" she whispered, so softly only those at her table could hear. But her shock was visible to everyone. "What is he doing here?" Richard looked confused. "Mother, who is that?" But the man, Mr. Kalen, was already moving. He and his 2 guards walked with purpose, not towards the head table, but parting the sea of shocked guests, their footsteps silent on the thick carpet. They were walking directly toward table 19. They stopped in front of Sarah. The entire room, 300 of the most powerful people in New York, turned in their seats to stare at the forgotten, pregnant wife in the back corner. Mr. Kalen ignored the stares. He ignored Richard, who was now standing, his face a mask of confusion. Kalen stopped directly in front of Sarah. He placed his briefcase on the table, and then, in a gesture that stunned the entire room, he gave a short, formal bow from the waist. "Madam Chairwoman," he said, his voice clear and carrying a distinct Swiss-German accent. "Forgive my intrusion. We have been waiting for 10 p.m. Zurich time. The final transfer is complete. Your grandfather's will is now executed." The silence in the ballroom was no longer polite. It was absolute, heavy, and fraught with disbelief. Richard finally found his voice. He began stalking from the head table toward the back, his face thunderous. "What is the meaning of this?" he boomed, trying to reclaim authority. "Who are you? What is this nonsense? Sarah, do you know these men?" Sarah looked up, not at Richard, but at the man who had called her Madam Chairwoman. "Mr. Kalen, I didn't expect you. Not here. Your grandfather, Henrik Ethelredge, was specific," Kalen said, his voice level, projecting for the room to hear. "He instructed me that upon the final execution of his estate, I was to deliver this to you personally, wherever you were. He said, and I quote, 'She will most likely be in a den of vipers. She will need her armor.'" Richard finally reached them, his face purple with rage. "I am Richard Grayson. This is a private event. You will leave now. And you," he spat at Sarah, grabbing her arm. "You are coming with me. This charade is over. Unhand her." Kalen didn't raise his voice, but the command had the force of a physical blow. The 2 security men flanking him simultaneously turned toward Richard, their jackets shifting just enough to reveal the outlines of professional-grade equipment. Richard, for the first time in his life, looked afraid. He dropped Sarah's arm. "I do not think you understand who you are speaking to, Mr. Grayson," Kalen said, his cold blue eyes locking on Richard. "But you will." He unfastened the latches on the aluminum briefcase. Click, click. "Your grandfather, Ms. Sarah," Kalen continued, "was not just a historian, as he preferred to be called. He was, for 50 years, the sole, anonymous chairman of the Ethelredge Trust." A wave of gasps erupted from the older members of the gala. The Ethelredge Trust. It wasn't a company. It was a myth, a discreet, multinational consortium of banking, rare minerals and high-level technology, with holdings so vast they influenced global markets. It was older than America, wealthier than empires, and as of 10 p.m. Zurich time, Kalen said, as his sole heir, that title and all its assets pass to you. He opened the case. Inside, on a bed of dark blue velvet, was not a stack of papers. It was a single, breathtaking object. It was a necklace, but at its center was a diamond the size of a robin's egg, of a deep, impossible blue. It seemed to drink the light of the chandeliers and glow from within. "The Kalian star," a banker at a nearby table whispered, his voice trembling. "I thought it was a legend, that it was lost in the war." "It was never lost," Kalen said, his eyes on Sarah. "It was merely private. It is the traditional marker of the chair. Your crown, if you will, madam." Kalen lifted the heavy, priceless artifact from the case. The room watched, mesmerized. Morgana Van Kempt, from the head table, let her champagne flute slip from her fingers. It shattered on the floor, the sound unnaturally loud in the vacuum of the room. Richard was shaking his head, a grotesque smile plastered on his face. No, this is a joke. It's a prank. Sarah, tell them you're nobody. You're from nowhere. Your grandfather was a poor old man. Sarah finally stood. The pregnancy, which had been her vulnerability, now seemed to give her a regal, grounded power. She looked at the man she had loved, the man who had just tried to publicly destroy her. "He taught me history, Richard," she said, her voice quiet but carrying in the total silence. "He just neglected to mention that our family wrote most of it." She turned to Caelan. "Thank you for the delivery, Mr. Caelan." Caelan bowed again. "We have much to discuss, Madam Chairwoman, including the recent and very foolish financial activities of Grayson Industries." That one sentence, the financial activities of Grayson Industries, struck Beatrice Grayson like a physical blow. She, who had been frozen in her chair, finally stood, her face a mask of chalky terror. What activities?" Beatrice stammered, clutching the emeralds at her throat. "What do you mean?" Mr. Caelan turned his gaze, which felt like a blast of Arctic air, toward the head table. "Mrs. Grayson, did you really think the Ethelredge Trust would not notice when you began liquidating secured assets to cover your son's catastrophic failures in the Singapore market? You have been insolvent for 6 months. Richard lunged forward. "You lie! Our lines of credit are secure. We just finalized a new partnership." He looked desperately at Morgana. Morgana, however, was staring at Caelan as if he were the Grim Reaper. "Ah, yes," Caelan said with a thin, cruel smile. "The emergency loan you took 2 weeks ago. The one you secured by selling a 51% controlling interest in the Grayson Foundation and all its subsidiary real estate holdings to a silent partner in Geneva." Beatrice made a small, choking sound. She was swaying on her feet. That was a private arrangement," she whispered. "It was," Caelan agreed. "Your family's last, desperate secret. But you see, Mrs. Grayson, the Ethelredge Trust does not like silent partners. We are the partner." The second bomb had landed. The room exploded in a cacophony of sound. People were standing, pulling out phones, shouting, "They bought the Graysons! He sold his own company! She owns everything!" Richard stared at Sarah, his mind visibly breaking, unable to process the new reality. You own my company." "It seems," Sarah said, her voice strengthening, "that I am your new boss, Richard, and your new landlord." Morgana Van Kempt, seeing her future of penthouses and power evaporate, finally snapped. You pregnant witch! You planned this! You lied to all of us! You imposter!" She lunged at Sarah, her hands clawed, aiming for her face. She never made it. Caelan's 2 security guards moved with a speed that was terrifying. Before Morgana had taken 2 steps, one guard had intercepted her, grabbing her by the wrists in a grip that made her shriek in pain. "Do not touch the chairwoman," the guard said, his voice a flat, deadly monotone. "Mr. Caelan," Sarah said, not even flinching, "this is a private event. I believe Miss Van Kempt is trespassing." "I quite agree," Caelan said. He nodded to the guards. "Remove her, and call the Van Kempt Global Legal Team. I believe their father will want to know that the trust is calling in all their outstanding credit lines, effective immediately." "You can't!" Morgana shrieked, as she was physically dragged, kicking and screaming from the ballroom. "My father will destroy you!" "Your father," Caelan called after her, "will be bankrupt by Monday." The doors slammed shut behind her. Every eye in the room returned to the three people left standing in the center of the chaos: Richard, Beatrice, and Sarah. Beatrice Grayson finally succumbed. Her eyes rolled back in her head, and she collapsed to the floor in a dead faint, her emeralds scattering across the marble. Richard just stared at his mother's crumpled form, then back at Sarah. The arrogance was gone. The cruelty was gone. All that was left was a raw, pathetic terror. "Sarah," he whispered, taking a step toward her. "Sarah, please, my love. You can't. I didn't know. It was my mother. It was Morgana. They forced me. You have to believe me. I love you. I love our baby." He dropped to his knees, grabbing at the hem of her simple navy dress. "We can fix this. We can run the company together. We can be a family." Sarah looked down at the man kneeling at her feet. The man who, not 10 minutes before, had called her a nobody and let the world laugh at her. The man who had planned to steal her child. She let him grovel. She let the silence stretch out, letting every single person in that room watch their golden boy, Richard Grayson, beg. Then she stepped back, pulling her dress from his grasp, as if he were something unclean. "Mr. Kalen," she said, her voice like ice. "Madam, please have my husband served with the divorce papers my mother-in-law so helpfully prepared. I will be amending them. I want everything. The grounds will be adultery, financial fraud, and extreme emotional distress. He will get nothing." "And the child?" Kalen asked gently. Sarah placed a hand on her stomach. "He is not a Grayson. He is an Ethelred. He will never know his father's name." She turned, Kalen's guards forming a protective phalanx around her. She didn't look back at the man sobbing on the floor. She didn't look at the fainted woman. She didn't look at the 300 shocked faces. She simply walked out of the ballroom, her head held high, as the most powerful woman in New York. The silence that followed her was one of pure, unadulterated awe. The fallout was not just immediate, it was seismic. The Grayson Gala, intended to be a celebration of the family's power, became known as the Reckoning. While Sarah was settled into the Ethelred Trust's permanent penthouse at the Pierre, a residence her grandfather had owned for decades and she had never known existed, Mr. Kalen executed her orders with surgical and brutal precision. By 9 a.m. the next morning, the financial world was in chaos. Van Kempt Global, Kalen's call to pull the trust's credit lines, was the first domino. It triggered a panic. Other creditors, smelling blood, called in their own loans. By noon, VK Global stock had plummeted by 80%. By Monday, as Kalen predicted, Morgana's father was filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The penthouse at 15 Central Park West, which Richard had bought in Morgana's name, was seized by creditors. Grayson Industries. The news that the Graysons had lost their company to a silent partner, who was then revealed to be the mythical Ethelred Trust, was the lead story on Bloomberg and the Wall Street Journal. But the real story was the one Kalen's auditors leaked. Richard Grayson had not just failed in the Singapore market, he had been engaging in rampant fraud, using shell companies to siphon money for his lifestyle with Morgana. Richard and Beatrice. Beatrice woke up in a hospital to find her company gone, her reputation shattered, and her son under investigation by the SEC. The annulment papers she had threatened Sarah with were now the centerpiece of Sarah's own divorce filing. Their assets were frozen. The Grayson name, once a pillar of New York society, was now synonymous with scandal and ruin. Richard tried desperately to fight. He hired a lawyer, claiming Sarah had tricked him, that she was mentally unstable. This led to the second and final meeting. It took place in a sterile downtown law office. Sarah was not there. She was in her 3rd trimester and refused to be in the same room as him. Only Kalen was present, alongside a team of lawyers. "This is ridiculous," Richard blustered, though his suit was wrinkled and his eyes bloodshot. "I am the child's father. I have rights. I will not be erased." Sarah's lead attorney, a shark named Marissa Lyons, slid a single iPad across the table. "On the contrary, Mr. Grayson, you will be." Richard looked at the screen. It was a wire transfer confirmation, one that he had made 3 days before the gala. He had been wiring company money, now Sarah's money, to an offshore account co-signed by Morgana Van Kempt. It was blatant criminal embezzlement. "We have 2 options," Lyons said, her voice flat. "Option A. We hand this and the other 34 transactions we found to the district attorney. You will be prosecuted for wire fraud, embezzlement, and a host of other felonies. You will spend, conservatively, 15 to 20 years in a federal prison. Your mother, as co-signer on the company accounts, will likely be implicated as an accessory." Richard's face went white. "Or," Lyons continued, "Option B. You sign these papers." She produced a new stack. "You will waive all parental rights, present and future. You will agree to never contact Miss Ethelredge or her child again. You will plead guilty to a single, lesser charge of financial mismanagement, for which the trust will recommend probation and a fine, which we will pay for your signature. You will be left with your father's original trust fund, which is quite frankly barely enough to cover your debts. You will have nothing else. You will disappear, and you will never, ever say the name Ethelredge again." Richard looked at Kalen, who just stared back, his face impassive stone. He looked at the prison sentence, and he looked at the signature line. He grabbed the pen and signed, his hand shaking so badly his signature was almost illegible. He signed away his son, his marriage, and his entire life for the simple, pathetic privilege of staying out of jail. The light in New York was sharp, fractured, and competitive. It was a light that bounced off glass towers and steel, a light that seemed to demand you prove your right to exist beneath it. The light in Geneva was different. It was old, soft, and patient. It fell in gentle sheets across the vast, placid surface of the lake, illuminating the snow on the distant Alps with an ethereal, pearlescent glow. It was a light that didn't demand. It simply was. 1 month after the reckoning, Sarah sat in the solarium of the Villa Ethel, the sprawling yet understated estate that had been her grandfather's true home. It was not a penthouse or a townhouse. It was a fortress of quiet, old-world power, built of pale, warm stone, with roots that went as deep into the Swiss soil as the Ethelredge families went into history. In her arms, wrapped in a simple cashmere blanket, was Marcus Henrik Ethelredge. He was 3 weeks old, with a full head of dark hair and a peacefully sleeping face that was, to Sarah, the only real thing in the world. The chaos of the gala, the cruelty of Beatrice, the pathetic betrayal of Richard. It all felt like a vulgar, noisy play she had been forced to watch from a very bad seat. This was real. The villa was not silent. It was filled with the quiet, efficient hum of the Ethelredge Trust's global headquarters, which, she had learned, was housed in a discreet, state-of-the-art facility, built directly beneath the estate's formal gardens. Her grandfather had, quite literally, run a multinational financial empire from his library. "Madam Chairwoman?" Sarah looked up. Mr. Kalen stood in the doorway, holding a slim, leather-bound file. He no longer looked like a security operative. In his home environment, he wore a simple, impeccably tailored wool suit. He looked what he was, the most powerful private counsel in the world. "Mr. Kalin," Sarah replied, her voice soft, not wanting to wake Marcus. "Please come in. Have a seat." "I have the final dissolution reports," he said, taking a chair opposite her. The crackling fireplace was the only sound for a moment. "You have been busy," he said, opening the file. It was a profound understatement. In the last 3 weeks, while recovering from childbirth, Sarah had been on daily secure video calls, absorbing 5 decades of her grandfather's work. She had learned about the Trust's controlling interests in biomedical tech, green energy, and, most surprisingly, a global network of humanitarian aid organizations. She was not just rich. She was a global force. "Let's start with the Graysons," Kalin said, his voice crisp. "Grayson Industries is, as of 9 a.m. Zurich time today, officially defunct. The name has been scrubbed from all exchanges." "And the employees?" Sarah asked. This had been her first and most insistent order. "As per your instructions, the Employee Pension Fund, which Mr. Grayson had illegally borrowed against, was made whole. Every employee, from the executive assistants to the janitorial staff, has been given a severance package equal to 2 years' salary. The letters informing them that the funds came from a private grant, not the Graysons, went out this morning." Sarah nodded, a small weight lifting from her chest. "Good. The people who actually worked for a living shouldn't suffer for his ego." "Next," Kalin continued, "the physical assets, the Grayson townhouse in Manhattan." "Sell it," Sarah said immediately. "And the contents, all of it. The Rubens tapestries at the museum, the ones Beatrice was so proud of. I had the provenance checked. They were looted art." Kalin permitted himself a thin smile. "I am already ahead of you, madam. They are being returned to the museum in Brussels, from which they were acquired in 1944. The Belgian government sends its deepest gratitude." "And the proceeds from the townhouse?" "Already diverted, as you requested. They now fully fund the top 3 women's and children's shelters in New York City, the same ones the Grayson Foundation had on their donor list, but hadn't actually paid in 3 years. This, Sarah knew, was the true justice. Not just taking their money, but using it to fix the things they had broken or neglected. Kalin turned a page. "The Van Kempts. Morgana and her father were caught attempting to flee to Brazil, a non-extradition country, to avoid their creditors. They were detained in Miami. They are penniless. The name Van Kempt is now as toxic on Wall Street as Grayson." "And him?" Sarah asked. She didn't need to say the name. Kalin's face hardened slightly. "Richard Grayson. He signed the papers. He has no claim on you, or on young Mr. Marcus. He took the deal. He has his father's original, and now quite small, trust fund. Our surveillance team, which I will maintain, with your permission." "It has my permission," Sarah said. "Reports he is in Monaco. He lost, by our calculation, 68% of his remaining funds at the baccarat tables at the Casino de Monte Carlo. In 2 weeks, he is a ghost, madam. A pathetic, irrelevant ghost." "Good," Sarah whispered. She looked down at Marcus. A ghost was what Richard deserved to be. He was an absence, a void. "That," Kalin said, closing the file, "is the last of it. The world you knew is gone. Cleaned up. Thank you, Mr. Kalin, for your efficiency, and for everything. I serve the chair, madam, as I served your grandfather." He paused, looking at the sleeping child. "He would be indescribably proud of you. He always said you were the one, that you had his strength, but your mother's heart. A combination he called unbeatable." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes, the first she had allowed herself to shed in weeks. They were not tears of sadness, but of a profound, aching relief. It was over. A soft chime echoed through the room. It was not Kaelin's phone. It was the house's internal security alert. Kaelin's head snapped up, his entire demeanor changing in a nanosecond, reverting to the man of action from the gala. "What is it?" Sarah asked, clutching Marcus tighter. Kaelin tapped the earpiece he always wore. He listened, his face growing dark. "Madam," he said, his voice low and urgent, "you should go to the nursery. Now, the security team will escort you." "Kaelin, what is it?" "We have a breach at the front gate. Not a violent one, a civilian, but it is someone who should not be here." "Who?" Sarah demanded, standing up. Kaelin looked her in the eyes. "It's Beatrice Grayson." A bolt of pure, cold ice went through Sarah's heart. "Here? How? How had she found her? How had she gotten past the layers of Swiss security? "She is distressed," Kaelin said, listening to his earpiece. "She's demanding to see you. Says it's a matter of life and death. She claims to have information about Richard." "It's a lie," Sarah said, her voice shaking. "It's a trick. She wants to beg, or to curse me." "I agree," Kaelin said. "The local police are 10 minutes out. We can have her detained for trespassing." Sarah looked at the door. She looked at her son. She thought of the trembling, humiliated woman she had been at the gala. She thought of the snivelling, pathetic wreck Richard had become, and she thought of the skeletal queen, Beatrice, collapsing in a heap of emeralds. "No," Sarah said. Kaelin looked at her, stunned. "Madam? No, I'm not running. I'm not hiding. Not in my own home. This ends. It ends now." "It is an unacceptable security risk," Kaelin argued, his voice firm. "Then you will be with me, and your men will be outside the door. But I will see her." Her voice had taken on a new tone. It was not a request. It was the command of the chairwoman. Kaelin studied her for a long moment. He saw the stone her grandfather had spoken of. "Very well," he said. "But not in the house. We will use the boathouse. It is secure, and it is separate. Give the child to his nurse. You will not, under any circumstances, take him with you." The boathouse was a separate structure of stone and old timber, set over the lapping waters of the lake. It was cold, damp, and smelled of lake water and old cedar. 2 of Kaelin's men, dressed in the same severe suits as at the gala, stood guard outside the main door. Inside, Kaelin stood by the far wall, a silent sentinel. Sarah stood in the center of the room, near a large window overlooking the water. She was dressed simply, in wool trousers and a cashmere sweater. She was no longer a pregnant, vulnerable woman. She was the master of this domain. The door opened. 2 more guards escorted Beatrice Grayson inside. The change was shocking. The woman who entered was not the proud, terrifying matriarch of the Grayson Gala. The perfectly coiffed hair was thin and lank. The bespoke suit she wore was wrinkled as if she'd slept in it. Her eyes were wild, bloodshot, and rimmed with a desperate, manic energy. The emeralds were gone. Her hands, bare of rings, twisted a damp tissue over and over. When she saw Sarah, she let out a sound, a half-sob, half-gasp, and lunged forward. Kaelin's men instantly blocked her path, holding her by the arms. "Let her go," Sarah said, her voice echoing in the cold space. The guards released her. Beatrice stumbled, catching herself on a workbench. She was breathing in ragged, painful gasps. "You," Beatrice wheezed, her voice a cracked whisper. "You did this. You... witch. You destroyed us." "I did nothing, Beatrice," Sarah said, her voice perfectly level, devoid of all emotion. "You built your house on foundations of ego. My grandfather warned me about people like you. I just provided the strong wind." "He's gone!" Beatrice shrieked, the sound hysterical. "My son! My boy! He's gone! They took everything. The house, the bank accounts, my friends. No one will even take my calls." "That is the consequence of your actions," Sarah said. "You lived by a code of social and financial cruelty. You are merely experiencing it for yourself. Why are you here?" "Richard," Beatrice sobbed, her face crumpling. "He's in trouble. Real trouble. Not just the money. The SEC. They're talking about new charges. About prison." "I know," Sarah said. "Embezzlement. Wire fraud. He's lucky I agreed to the deal I did. He should be in a federal prison right now." No, you don't understand," Beatrice cried, taking a step closer. "He called me. From Monaco. He was terrified. He said you wouldn't stop. That you were trying to have him killed." Sarah stared at her. Of all the things she had expected, this was not it. "Killed. He said your men," she gestured wildly at Kalen, "were following him. That they were threatening him. That you're trying to silence him. He's my son. He's all I have. You have to call them off. Please." She fell to her knees, the proud Beatrice Grayson, grovelling on the cold, damp stone floor of a boathouse. "Please, Sarah, I'll do anything. I'll apologize. I'll tell the world. Just don't hurt my son. He's a fool, I know he is. But he's mine." Sarah looked at Kalen. His face was a mask of cold, controlled fury. "Mr. Kalen," Sarah said, "are we, or any agents of the trust, attempting to assassinate my ex-husband?" "No, Madam Chairwoman," Kalen said, his voice flat. "The Ethelredge Trust does not engage in such primitive measures. Our surveillance is discreet, and for your protection only. Mr. Grayson is, as I said, irrelevant." "He's lying!" Beatrice shrieked from the floor. "Richard told me. He was crying. He's afraid for his life." A terrible, cold, and final understanding dawned on Sarah. She saw the whole pathetic picture. "Get up, Beatrice," Sarah commanded. Beatrice, startled by her tone, slowly, shakily, got to her feet. "You're right," Sarah said. "Your son is in new trouble, and he is terrified, but not of me." Sarah walked to the window, looking out at the calm, implacable lake. "Mr. Kalen, tell her what our new audit found, the one Richard didn't know we were conducting." Kalen stepped forward, his eyes locked on Beatrice. "Mrs. Grayson, in our final dissolution of Grayson Industries, our forensic accountants discovered a series of wire transfers, not to the Singapore market, not to Morgana Van Kempt." Beatrice just stared, uncomprehending. "They were transfers," Kalen continued, "from your personal, protected, ancestral trust, the one your great-grandfather established. They were moved, over the last 18 months, into a high-risk, unaudited fund in the Cayman Islands." "What?" Beatrice whispered. "That's not possible. I have the only signature." "No," Kalen said. "You do not. Your son, Richard, was granted co-signing authority 5 years ago. He has been systematically draining your personal fortune for almost 2 years to cover his catastrophic personal and professional failures. The new charges the SEC is investigating. They are for forging your signature on documents to secure loans against your trust." Beatrice's hand went to her throat. No, he wouldn't." "He did," Sarah said, turning back to her. "The men he's afraid of in Monaco. They aren't mine, Beatrice. They're the loan sharks he borrowed from after he'd stolen all of your money and all of mine. He's not afraid of being killed by me. He's afraid of being found by them. He called you with that pathetic, paranoid story for one reason, to see if you had any money left that he could steal to save his own skin. The truth, in all its ugly, selfish horror, landed in the room. Richard hadn't just betrayed his wife. He had devoured his own mother. He had been willing to let her go to prison with him, had, in fact, actively used her as a shield and a piggy bank. Beatrice made a sound that was not human. It was a high, thin wail of absolute despair. She didn't faint this time. She just shattered. "My boy," she whispered, her eyes vacant, staring at nothing. It was all of it. He did it. "Yes," Sarah said. "He is a monster. And you raised him. You taught him that money was more important than people, that legacy was more important than love, that cruelty was a tool. He just learned his lessons too well. He finally used them on you." Sarah walked to the door. "Kaelin, give her a check for 5,000 francs, enough to get a hotel in the village and a flight back to wherever she goes now. Florida, I suppose." "Madame, that is too generous," Kaelin murmured. "It's not generosity," Sarah said, loud enough for Beatrice to hear. "It's a transaction. I'm paying her for the last piece of information I needed, the proof that my son is better off with no father at all than with one like him." She paused at the door. "Beatrice, never come here again. You are not just trespassing on my property. You are trespassing in my world. It's a world you no longer belong to. Your name means nothing here." Sarah walked out into the clean, cold, alpine air, and never looked back. She left Beatrice Grayson to be escorted off the property, a broken, empty vessel, finally and completely erased. She returned to the solarium, where the fire was still crackling. Marcus was awake, his nurse just having brought him in. Sarah picked him up, holding him close, smelling the sweet, clean scent of her son. Kaelin entered, silent. "It's done," Sarah said. "Yes, madam." He placed a single, old, leather-bound book on the table beside her. "Your grandfather instructed me to give this to you, after you had truly become the chairwoman. I believe that day is today." It was Henrik Ethelredge's personal journal. Sarah opened it. On the first page, in his familiar, strong script, was a letter, dated 6 months ago. "My dearest Sarah, my Schatzli, if you are reading this, I am gone, and the world has shown you its teeth. I am sorry. I spent my life hiding you from this. My own family was destroyed by the burden of this power, by the wars and the greed that it attracts. I tried to give you a normal life, a life of books and art and quiet strength. I wanted you to fall in love with a good man, to have a child, to be happy, not just powerful. But I see now, the world found you anyway. People like the Graysons are drawn to goodness like parasites. They seek to feed on it. I see I was wrong. I should not have hidden your power from you. I should have taught you how to wield it. But I suspect you have learned anyway. The test I set, the trap I laid for your tormentors, it was to see if the power would corrupt you or reveal you. Remember this. The Kaelian star, the vaults, the bank, that is not the crown. That is just ballast. It is a tool. You are the crown, your mind, your stone center, your mother's good heart. Do not let them make you hard. Do not let them make you cruel. Vengeance is for the weak. Justice is for the strong. Love your child. Love him more than all the gold in our vaults. That is our true legacy. You are and always were my greatest pride. You are not just Ethelredge stone. You are Ethelredge steel. Sarah closed the journal, tears streaming down her face, falling onto Marcus's blanket. She looked up at Calen, her expression clear and strong. "Mr. Calen," she said, her voice full of a new, calm authority. "Prepare the jet. I want to be in New York tomorrow." "Madam?" he asked, surprised. "I'm keeping the Grayson Foundation," she said. "I'm not selling it. I'm renaming it, the Henrik Ethelredge Foundation, and I'm going to run it myself. My first act as chairwoman won't be to dissolve a legacy of cruelty. It will be to build a new one, of stone and of steel." Calen looked at the woman before him, a mother, a survivor, a leader, and he bowed deeply. "Yes, Madam Chairwoman, I will make the arrangements." Sarah turned back to the window, holding her son. The sun was setting over the lake, painting the Alps in gold and rose. It was no longer a light to hide in. It was a light to build in. And she was just getting started. And so, the banquet hall that was meant to be the stage for Sarah's greatest humiliation became the theater of her ultimate liberation. She walked away, not just with her dignity, but with the power to ensure that the cruelty of people like Richard and Morgana would never harm another person again. Her story is a powerful reminder that true worth is never defined by the labels others place on you, or the clothes you wear, or the table you're seated at. True power lies in integrity, in strength, and in the stone you're made of. Sometimes, the nobody in the corner of the room is the one who actually owns the entire building. What did you think of Sarah's transformation? Have you ever seen someone so underestimated reveal their true power? Let us know your favorite part of her revenge in the comments below. Thank you for watching. If you loved this story of justice, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to see it, and be sure to subscribe to the channel for more unforgettable drama.